Hello, everybody. Welcome or welcome back. My name is Monique, and I'm on a financial health journey to create an inheritance for the generations to come. I want to do that through consistency and discipline. Today is Thursday, May the 30th. We are here to do a weekly closeout for the week of 5/24 through 5/30. I run my weeks from Friday to a Thursday. Today's Thursday. Time to close this week out. I'd like to thank anybody who's liked or commented on any of my videos, and especially those that chose to subscribe to my channel. Truly started this as a way to hold myself accountable, but I understand, recognize, and appreciate the community as a whole. So if you're rocking with me on this journey, thank you, thank you, thank you. If you haven't made up your mind yet, sit with me for a spell. And at the end of this video, if it's content you find valuable or enjoyable, please feel free to subscribe. So, y'all, I made a boo-boo. I did not take my cash with me to go on my trip to South Carolina. And because of that, I've had to do a whole lot of work over the last couple of days to try and get my budget back right. And then we had a problem at the bank. And I have a bank dispute that's currently in the works. And so we'll talk about that in a moment. So first, I rolled over $642 from the last week's budget. As far as my bills are concerned, the ones that were scheduled to come out, OneDrive, Gas South, and Apple Care have all come out. Ring, I'm not really sure about. Sometimes it comes out on the 30th, sometimes the 31st, sometimes the 1st. Kind of just depends on how their cycle runs. And so with that one, it still hasn't cleared, but it is a subscription type. So it's one set amount that comes out every month. And I know how much that amount is. So I'm going to go ahead and document it here under the results as far as the fact that it got paid. But I'm not going to check it off because it still hasn't cleared yet. So I'm going to leave that there, and I'm going to go ahead and mark $118 as the amount for that one. Okay, so that's it for the bills. Next is the variable expenses. So one of the things that I tried to do, that I talked about in my last budget with me, was that I was going to separate out my money, keep some of it in the bank, have some of it as cash, because I'm trying some new things out, and I don't want to start calling my page Marriage and Money, but it almost feels like it's something that I talk about quite a bit. And this is just another example of how we're trying to merge everything together. So my thought was, and you'll know that this by the asterisks that you see here. So my thought is, when it comes to groceries, gas, home, dining, meds, and pets, I'm going to have a set amount of money that I give every week. Whether or not that money is used for those in those categories or not, I'm not sure. Sometimes Sweets will cover those expenses, and so then I wouldn't have to use it. For example, last week, I had $80 that I set aside for groceries. Sweets bought groceries last week, so I did not have to spend that $80. And all of the categories that I have marked off, I now have a everyday cash wallet or binder that I'm using, and I've got envelopes in here for each of those categories. And the reason for that is, instead of, because what I normally would have done is, if I had any money left over in any of these categories, I would roll it over into my wallet, or I would have put into my savings challenges that I have, and just pretty much start from scratch that next week. Now what I'm going to do is, if I have that money allotted for that category and I don't spend that money in that category, maybe because Sweets took care of it, or I use some of the money but not all, I'm actually going to start putting it into this binder so that we can start to build that up. So on the weeks that he's got it, and he's got me on groceries and he's got me on gas, great. I'll just save that money and have it into my binder. And then if there's ever a week that he ain't got me, I got him, right? So I'll be able to pull from that envelope and use that money for that as well. So that's how we're going to treat those going forward. So I kind of divvy up the money a little bit differently. I'm going to try and see how much I need to spend during the week. Is there anything I can put in these envelopes to have it start to build up a good bit of money in those, just in case we ever need it. So I'm looking at things a little bit differently. So with that said, divided my money up, put some of it in cash, put some of it in online, and then put all of the envelopes in my safe, before I left, forgot to pull the cash out. So now I get to South Carolina and I have a little bit of cash on me, but not a lot of cash on me because I didn't pull all of the money from the envelopes like I should have. And I got a lot of expenses that I know are coming. So with that said, I started to use my cards. And when I say cards, I mean my debit card that's associated with my variable expense account and with my bills account. I'm not talking about my credit cards. The credit cards are stored away in my, I ain't gonna tell you where, but they're stored away. And I don't travel with those. So I didn't have my credit cards to pull out. With that said, I only have so much buffer in my variable expense account and so much buffer in my bills account. So I was using both cards and I wasn't even strategic about which ones I used and for what purchase. Now, hindsight what would have been smarter is just to make a lump sum transfer from my bills account to my variable account and just use one card. But that's not what I did. I used both cards together. And why that's a problem is because my variable expense account is for this type of thing or transactions or for travel. And using that account for that amount, it makes sense, right? But I ended up swiping my bills debit card. And my concern was I'm using bill money. I know I have a buffer in there. I don't know how much. And I don't know if there's anything that's going to hit at the time, like my Gas South hadn't hit yet and some other things as well. So I said, what makes the best sense here? And I struggled because I was like, I need to hurry up and get home. So when I got home on Tuesday, I tried to put together the cash that I needed and tried to make a deposit into my bills account to cover those costs. So hindsight is 2020. What I should have done is taken the time, looked at my bills account, saw exactly how much buffer I had in there instead of just swiping, moved a set amount from the bills account to my variable expense account and just used my variable expense card until I could get back and reconcile those numbers. And that's what I will do if this ever happens again. But my plan is for this to never happen again. All right, so here are all of the expenses that I had. And I am going to, let me come in just a little bit so you can see a little bit better. But I am going to talk through these. So these are all the expenses that I have from 5/24 through 5/28. So let's talk about what you're seeing here. So first thing you'll see some things in blue. Anything that's in blue, my plan was to pull my sinking funds, and that's what I did, pull sinking fund money to cover those expenses. So they're not necessarily considered in the variable expense amount that I allotted myself for the week. They are money that I knew I was going to specifically pull from my sinking funds to cover these costs. And a lot of those you'll see are family. And then I did order a binder, a budget binder from Baddies and Budgets. She had an awesome sale on Memorial Day, 30% off. And so there was a binder I was looking at and I went ahead and pulled the trigger on that and went ahead and purchased that. So I did track everything that's in blue as a sinking fund. It's not included in my variable expense amount, and we'll talk about what that is in a minute. Next, I went through and I looked and see how I looked and checked on which expenses. This is the great thing about keeping your receipts. I looked and checked to see which ones I used cash for, because I did have a little bit of cash in my wallet. So anything that had the cash was paid for by cash, has the cash symbol on those. I went ahead and checked those off first because I knew that those were taken care of. Didn't have to worry about reconciling anything or putting any money back into the bank to cover those. The next thing I went through to do was to mark where the amounts came from. So my variable expense account is the Chase account. And you'll see that is running pretty clear up here at the top for the initial purchases I was making, because that's the account set up for variable expenses. But then things started getting a little dicey because I started to run out of money there. And so then I needed to change it up. But I did go in, and everywhere that I used my Chase account, the variable expense account, I wrote that in. And those I'm less concerned about because that's variable money. And so it should be used for variable expenses. The ones that were the biggest concern for me were the Newton. The Newton ones are the ones that come out of my bills account. And that was the money that I specifically wanted to make sure that I put back into the bank. And so I did document those down, and that's what you see here. So I did that. Next, I went through and tagged each of them with a certain category based on what that expense is. And so once I got finished doing that, I recognized that the current amounts that you see in purple, one was $50 from her sinking fund. Another one was the $20 that she typically gets. So I went ahead and took care of those and made sure those were pulled like they should have been. Next, I went to gas, and I allotted enough money to handle my gas. I just pulled, I purchased some of them through Chase, and then I purchased some of them through Newton. So I've got to put this Newton money back, which is okay, but it still met with my amount, and we'll talk about that in a second. So gas was okay. I moved to personal and looked at those. Personal was okay. The amount of money that I spent on personal kind of matched up with what I had available in my envelope when I got back and started to reconcile these numbers. So Corinne was good. Gas was good. Personal was good. Family, you'll notice all of my family expenses are in blue. I pulled from my family sinking fund binder for all of those. We're good. No problems there. Had enough money to cover that. Where I ran into a struggle was dining. That's this in red. For dining, started out good and had enough money to cover this $32 expense, this $2 expense. And then I had all of these that are in red as dining, and I realized I ran out of money. I didn't have enough money in my envelope to pull to cover these expenses. So where I had to, pull from groceries to help account for the rest. So I kind of got that idea from, She Has Cash and Plans. I think it's her YouTube page. She hasn't been online in a while, but I started to watch her when I initially started on this budget journey. And one of the things that she talked about is don't be afraid to pull money from other envelopes. The goal is to make sure that the cash that you have can go back into the bank to cover the expenses. And you don't have to be as much of a stickler about exactly which envelope it comes out of, because the goal is just to make sure that these expenses are covered and you have enough money in the bank to cover your bills. And so that's what I did. I tallied up or added up all of my dining expenses. I think I had about $40 additional in my cash envelope for dining that I'd left here after I'd spent the money online that I had for dining. So I was definitely over that $40 amount, though, that I still had remaining. So I went ahead and pulled money from grocery, and that's what you see here. So I pulled 17 from grocery here, 12 from grocery here, 9 from grocery here. So once I did that, I was able to cover all of those costs as well. So we are good. So that's kind of how I had to go in and reconcile those numbers. I took all of the Newton amounts, added those together, and I went to the bank to try and make a deposit. So story time on that piece. I went to make a deposit in the ATM, inserted my card, inserted the cash. I had about $183, not about exactly $183 I was depositing. And I put it in the ATM machine, and the screen went black, and then it went blue and said crash error, and then it flashed black again and said rebooting, and then it just never came back on. It just said temporarily unavailable. So it's got my money. It released my card from the slot, but it never released my money. It took the money. So I called the main office, which is where I was in the ATM, and explained the situation. And they told me I was going to have to come in and do a dispute. I think they did try to reset the ATM machine because I saw it flash a couple of times. It just wasn't working. So I ended up having to go into the bank, filled out a dispute. And I'm grateful to the budgeting community because overall, there have been some times that I've made cash deposits and I just assume the ATM will tell me how much it is. Like you have money that you're putting together and let me go ahead and make a deposit into the bank. I would just deposit into the ATM. It would tell me how much it was and I'd be like, okay. But now, because of working in this community and working on this budget thing, I count my money a lot, right? So I knew exactly how much it was. I even knew the amount of denominations, which I put down 6 20s, 11 5s, 8 1s, because I'm used to doing that. I'm grateful for that. But at the end of the day, I'm still waiting for that dispute to get settled. So I'm not sure. I know all of my bills have been covered, because we just talked about that. I know I have $10 more left in my bank for this. So I know my bills have been covered. I know that I am not negative in my account, so I'm good on that as well. But I am anxious about my 183 getting deposited in there because I did need to use that rollover to help me with my budget for the next paycheck, which I'm going to receive tomorrow on May the 31st. So we shall see. All right, so then let's look at our numbers and how they tally up. So for groceries, I budgeted $50 for this week. I spent $48. That $48 is one purchase of groceries down here for $10. And then the rest of it is me trying to account for the dining out that I did on my trip. So that's $48 that came out of groceries. I allotted $100 for gas. I spent $88. I allotted $40 for home. I spent $17. For dining, I allotted $40 overall. I spent that $40, and then I had to make it up in groceries for the rest. I gave $20 to Corinne. I allotted myself $50. I actually spent $60, so I'm a little bit over, and I'm going to do the results in a minute. Meds, I spent that $10, and I spent the $7 on pets. And then out of my sinking funds, that's the blue, I had $147 for that. So let's figure out over here. I am under budget by $2 in groceries, $12 in gas, 23, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, 23 in home. Dining is 0. Corinne is 0 as far as the difference is concerned. Monique, I am over by 10. I spent everything in meds and I spent everything in pets. All right, so I'm going to leave sinking funds out. Remember, that's not included in the variable expenses. That's why it's in blue, a different color. So let's see how much 2 plus 12 plus 23 minus 10 equals. So I'm $27. Yes. So I'm going to say here, I am $27. I'm going to put that 27 up here, under budget. Okay. So this is just accounting for the variable expenses because I decided to use that grocery money since I didn't have to buy groceries this past week. I decided to use that grocery money to help offset the dining cost. I am still under budget by $27. Now, when you add all of this together plus the sinking funds, you end up at $437. I'm going to move that. Let me see if I can move that because that's more so here. I'm just going to do that. Let's do this. Right? Because that's 437 was total, if I'm not mistaken there. But over here, budgeted was 317. And I'm going to say 48 plus 88 plus 17 plus 40 plus 20 plus 60 plus 10 plus 7 equals $290. So that's here. And $90. So if you subtract that from 317 equals the 27. So that 27 is right. There you go. Okay. Now, when you factor in the sinking fund money, I spent $437 total. But of course, since that's sinking funds, it's not variable expenses, so I'm okay. So I am $27 here. As a result, I am $27 under budget. So let's look at totals and see what we actually spent. I'm going to keep that sinking funds out of the mix for right now. So I started with $642. I subtract 118. That leaves me with 524. And here, I'm going to subtract the 290 because that's the number without the sinking funds. So minus 290 equals $234 is what I should have had to roll over. $234. $234. Now, I said I only had $150 to roll over on the budget with me that I just did. Where is that at? Yeah, here it is. GoodNotes is glitching. So I did say up here when I did my budget with me that I felt like I was going to have at least $150 to roll over. It sounds like I have a little bit more than that to roll over. And so I'm going to go ahead and just mark here. Then I'm going to try 200. I'm going to leave that 34 off, but I'm going to say 200 now to roll over as the actual. Now that I've completed the closeout for this particular week. So it was a rough week, right? Just with all of the expenses, but I still came in under budget, and I'm still working through how to make things a little bit better or easier for us as we're managing through our money. But it looks like I'm still $234 under budget. I'm grateful about that. We're going to roll over 200 of that and use that as far as the budget is concerned. And I think we are good to go. All right. I think, oh, and the last thing I will do, let's move all of this over. Now, let me just tell you, there's no cash in here. Let's not fool ourselves. So all of these, all that's empty. All of that's empty. But I do have some change. So I'm going to go in, and I'm sorry, I'm shaking the camera a lot. So let me come out. Yeah, that is it. Should slide the tower on over and see what we got. Got some pennies. Got some nickels. No, I don't. Dimes. Yes, I do. Quarters. Yes, I do. At the end of June, I'll add all of this stuff up and make a deposit into the bank or into Little Beans account. We'll see. So we'll put that over. My change is done for, and we are good. So that is the budget. I'll be back on Saturday. You'll probably see this video. I'm making it on Thursday. You'll see it on Friday. And then I'll do a cash stuffing video for Saturday. And I think we're good. Thanks, everybody, for your time. You guys have a good one.